Maya Thompson stared at the rejection letter in her hands, the words blurring as tears threatened to spill. Third time denied for flight status. The Air Force Academy graduate carefully folded the paper and tucked it into her flight jacket. The one she'd earned but wasn't allowed to wear officially. Little did she know that in just 6 months, she would perform an emergency landing that would save the lives of 37 passengers, including a 4-star general who would change the course of her career forever. But first, she had to survive. Being the outsider in wings that everyone insisted she hadn't earned. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from. And if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed. Because tomorrow, I've saved something extra special for you. The morning sun glinted off polished aircraft at Riverside Air Base as Maya made her way across the tarmac. Unlike the other pilots gathered for the elite Tactical Aviation Program, her uniform bore the insignia of a maintenance officer, not a pilot. At 32, she was nearly a decade older than most candidates, her experience coming from civilian aviation and years of fighting for a chance at military flight status. "Hey, Thompson, did you bring the right tools to fix our planes when we get back?" called Lieutenant James Reed, a cocky pilot with a perfect record and a family legacy of Air Force generals. His comment drew snickers from the group, clustered around the sleek F-35 simulators they'd be training in. Maya didn't respond. She'd learned long ago that proving herself through actions rather than words was the only way forward. Instead, she gripped her worn logbook filled with thousands of civilian flight hours and detailed notes on aircraft systems that most of these military-trained pilots barely understood. Colonel William Foster, the program director, barely acknowledged her as she approached. "Thompson, maintenance liaison for simulation analysis?" he asked, scanning his tablet with a frown. "No, sir." "Flight assessment candidate, sir," Maya replied firmly. Foster looked her up and down, taking in her maintenance badge and the age difference between her and the other candidates. "Right," he said, his tone making it clear he thought otherwise. "We'll see." The morning briefing made the program's philosophy crystal clear. "Automated response is everything at Riverside," Colonel Foster explained. "Our pilots need to trust the aircraft's systems implicitly. The new neural adaptive flight controls require split-second decisions backed by computer modeling. Second-guessing the system costs lives." Maya's stomach tightened. Everything in her decade of flight experience had taught her the opposite. That sometimes the computer was wrong, that human judgment and mechanical understanding saved planes when automation failed. But here, that perspective seemed unwelcome. During the equipment inspection, Chief Master Sergeant Ramirez, the simulation supervisor, stopped at Maya's station. "Thompson, I see you've requested manual override settings for your simulator profile. That's contrary to program protocols." "Yes, sir. I believe pilots should maintain proficiency with manual controls in case systems fail," she answered. "This isn't civilian aviation, Thompson," Ramirez said, loud enough for others to hear. "Our systems don't fail. Manual override is a last resort, not a primary strategy." The laughter that followed was predictable. Maya had spent her entire career fighting against the military's increasing reliance on automation, a philosophy that seemed to value button pushers over pilots who truly understood their aircraft. $10 says ground control washes out. Before the first simulation phase, Reed said to his friends as they prepared their stations. The nickname was immediate and cutting: ground control. By lunch, even some instructors were using it. Maya endured it all silently, focusing instead on studying the aircraft systems and simulator parameters. She had no way of knowing that. In just a few months, her understanding of mechanical systems and insistence on manual proficiency would save dozens of lives during a catastrophic systems failure, including the life of a visiting general. But first, she had to survive being the outsider that everyone had already dismissed as too old, too cautious, and too contrary to the program's philosophy. The simulation base stretched before them like a futuristic command center. 12 identical pods, each containing a perfect replica of an F-35 cockpit. The walls were lined with monitoring screens where instructors could watch every decision and reaction of the candidates. "Pilots, you have 90 seconds to complete each emergency scenario," Colonel Foster announced over the intercom. "Trust your systems, follow protocols, respond to automated guidance. Speed and compliance are the metrics we're evaluating." Maya settled into her simulator, feeling the familiar contours of a cockpit, even if this one was far more advanced than the commercial aircraft she'd flown for years. Around her, the other candidates were already discussing automated response strategies and computer-assisted decision trees. The simulation began with a series of increasingly complex emergencies, from simple engine warnings to catastrophic systems failures. Lieutenant Reed blazed through scenarios, relying entirely on the automated systems to guide his responses. His hands barely touched the manual controls, his eyes fixed on the guidance displays rather than the traditional instrumentation. Maya worked differently. For each scenario, she quickly assessed the computer's recommendations, but verified them against her own knowledge of aircraft systems. When the simulation threw a complex hydraulic failure at her, she noticed something the computer missed, a cascade effect that would eventually impact the primary control surfaces. She overrode the automation and took manual control, stabilizing the aircraft using techniques she'd developed over thousands of hours of actual flight time. Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now back to the story. When the final buzzer sounded, Chief Ramirez walked the line, reviewing performance metrics. "Reed, excellent adherence to automated protocols. 97% compliance with system recommendations. All scenarios completed within time parameters." When he reached Maya's station, he paused. "Thompson, significant deviation from automated guidance. Manual override activated in 60% of scenarios." He frowned at his tablet. "Your aircraft remains stable in all scenarios, with superior outcomes in scenarios 6 and 9, but your methods are contrary to program philosophy. That's a failing performance." As they walked back to the briefing room, Maya heard the whispers start. "Told you she couldn't adapt to modern aviation. She's flying like it's still 2010. Maybe they'll let her wash the real planes." Ground control. That evening, she found transfer orders on her tablet. Effective immediately, she was being reassigned to Flight Systems Analysis, a desk job evaluating performance data. No simulator time, no flight path, just analyzing readouts from the very automated systems she didn't trust. "Hey, don't look so disappointed," Reed said, appearing beside her with mock sympathy. "At least now you can tell us why our computers work so well. Maybe fix them when they break." The laughter from his friend stung, but Maya simply closed her tablet and tucked it away. She'd report to Flight Systems Analysis tomorrow, as ordered, but something inside her hardened. She might not be fast enough to satisfy their blind faith in automation, but she knew something they didn't. Computers failed, and when they did, understanding the mechanical reality beneath the digital facade made all the difference. In the quiet of her quarters, she wrote a single line in her logbook: "Systems serve pilots, not the other way around." The next morning, she reported to Captain Eliza Chun in Flight Systems Analysis. Chun was a serious woman in her 40s with a PhD in aerospace engineering and no patience for military politics. "So you're the washout from TAP," Chun said, not unkindly. "Heard you keep overriding the automated systems." "Yes, ma'am." Chun studied her for a moment. "Well, Thompson, maybe you'll learn something useful here. These fancy neural networks they're so proud of need constant tweaking. And between you and me," she lowered her voice, Half these hotshots couldn't land a plane if the computer went dark. Maya managed a small smile. It was the first time anyone at Riverside had suggested she might have valuable insights. As she began learning the intricacies of the neural flight control systems and performance analysis, Maya didn't know that her new position would give her access to something invaluable: the detailed performance data of every simulation and flight test on base, including the classified failure rates that would soon become very important indeed. 3 weeks into her systems analysis assignment, Maya had settled into an invisible routine. She arrived before dawn, analyzed flight data, and endured the daily stream of jokes from the pilot candidates, who viewed the analysis department as little more than tech support. "How's it going, ground control?" Reed would ask whenever he came in for his performance review. "Make sure my simulator is calibrated perfectly. I've got a reputation to maintain." Maya would nod silently and process his flight data, often finding concerning patterns in his responses to certain emergency scenarios. She'd note these issues without comment, returning analyses that showed excellent compliance with automated systems, but questionable outcomes in edge cases where the computer's decision might not be optimal. The real revelation came when Captain Chun showed her the classified performance database. "Don't let this leave the department," Chun said, pulling up detailed analysis reports on her secure terminal. "But look at these patterns." Maya studied the data with growing alarm. The neural networks controlling the F-35s had significant blind spots in certain emergency scenarios, particularly those involving cascading systems failures. What's more, pilots trained exclusively on automated responses performed poorly when forced to take manual control, even briefly. "Ma'am," Maya said carefully, "some of these candidates might not be ready for actual flight conditions." Shen nodded grimly. "I've been trying to tell Colonel Foster that for months, but automation sells, Thompson. The brass loves the idea of foolproof systems and computer-perfect flight paths. They don't want to hear about the scenarios where human judgment still matters." That evening, Maya made a decision that would change everything. Using her access to the flight systems database and simulation records, she began compiling a detailed analysis of the program's vulnerabilities. She worked late into the night, cross-referencing system performance, pilot responses, and historical data from actual incidents. What she discovered was disturbing. The program's emphasis on automation was creating pilots who couldn't recognize when the systems were making dangerous decisions. Reed and several others scored perfectly on standard scenarios but failed catastrophically when subtle modifications were introduced that confused the neural networks. Maya documented everything meticulously, preparing a report that she planned to submit through proper channels. But she also knew that challenging the program's core philosophy would likely end what remained of her military career. The next morning brought an unexpected complication. Colonel Foster visited the analysis department personally, something that had never happened before. "Thompson," he said, his tone unusually serious, "I need to ask you about some unusual access patterns in the flight systems database." Maya's heart pounded, but her voice remained steady. "Sir, I've been analyzing performance data as part of my duties. That's not what I'm talking about." Foster moved closer. "Someone has been running unauthorized simulation scenarios and compiling reports on candidate vulnerabilities. That's above your clearance level." Captain Chun stepped forward. "Colonel, I authorized Thompson to access that data for comprehensive analysis." "If there's a problem," "The problem," Foster interrupted, "is that someone is creating unauthorized reports suggesting fundamental flaws in our training approach. Reports that could undermine the entire program." Maya realized her careful documentation had been discovered. But instead of backing down, she made a choice that surprised everyone, including herself. "Sir, if you've seen my reports, then you know what I've found." The excessive reliance on automation is creating dangerous gaps in pilot capability. The data proves it. The silence in the analysis lab was deafening. Foster stared at her for a long moment, his face unreadable. Thompson, you're a support staff member who washed out of flight training. What makes you think you're qualified to evaluate pilots who passed? Because I've been analyzing their responses for weeks, sir, and I've seen what happens when the automation fails. The candidates trust the systems completely, even when those systems make potentially fatal errors. It was the first time Maya had directly challenged the system, and she could see the anger building in Foster's face, but she also saw something else, uncertainty. Deep down, he knew she might be right. You're walking a dangerous line, Thompson. Foster said finally. I suggest you focus on your assigned duties and stop playing flight instructor. After he left, Chun put a hand on Maya's shoulder. You've got guts, I'll give you that, but be careful. Foster doesn't like being challenged, especially by someone the program already rejected. Maya nodded, but her resolve had only strengthened. She'd spent too many years being dismissed and overlooked because she questioned the growing dependence on automation. If nobody else would speak up for comprehensive pilot training and genuine flight mastery, then she would, regardless of the consequences. What she didn't know was that her confrontation with Foster had been overheard by someone who would soon play a crucial role in everything that followed. The atmosphere at Riverside shifted after Maya's confrontation with Colonel Foster. Word spread quickly through the base that the systems analyst had challenged the flight program's methods. Most of the pilots found it hilarious, the washout, critiquing the candidates who'd succeeded where she'd failed. Lieutenant Reed made sure everyone heard his take. Can you believe it? Ground control thinks she knows better than the instructors. Next thing you know, the janitor will be giving combat tactics lectures. But not everyone was laughing. General Eleanor Harrington, the Air Force Chief of Operations for Advanced Systems, had been quietly reviewing Maya's unauthorized reports. What she found troubled her deeply. Chun, she said, summoning the captain to her temporary office. Need to understand these flight analysis reports your analysts compiled. Are these findings accurate? Chun shifted uncomfortably. Yes, ma'am. Thompson has access to all the simulation data and flight performance metrics. Her analysis is thorough. She's identified some significant issues with candidate readiness. For actual flight conditions, General Harrington studied the report spread across her desk. According to this, several of our top-ranked candidates show serious performance degradation when automated systems provide suboptimal guidance. Reed's manual control effectiveness drops by 60% when neural networks deliver conflicting information. That's correct, ma'am. Then why are they still in the program? Chun hesitated. Ma'am, that's above my pay grade, but Thompson has been trying to raise these concerns through proper channels. That afternoon, General Harrington made an unusual request. She wanted to observe Maya's work in the systems analysis lab personally. When she arrived, she found Maya meticulously reviewing flight performance data, identifying patterns that the automated analytics had missed. Thompson, Harrington said, watching her work, show me what you mean about over-reliance on automation. Maya looked up, surprised to see the 4-star general. Ma'am, your reports suggest our training methods are creating dangerous gaps in pilot capability. I want to understand why. For the next hour, Maya walked General Harrington through her findings. She showed how automation-focused training created pilots who hesitated when forced to override systems, even when those systems were clearly malfunctioning. She demonstrated how several candidates had failed critical manual flight tests when the simulation deliberately provided incorrect guidance. The real problem, ma'am, Maya explained, is that we're training pilots to follow computer directions in a controlled environment with perfect systems. But real-world flights don't come with perfect conditions or flawless automation. Harrington nodded thoughtfully. You're saying we're optimizing for the simulator, not the mission. Exactly, ma'am. General Harrington made a decision that would have far-reaching consequences. I want you to document specific examples, names, performance data, projected. Real-world impact. Can you do that? Yes, ma'am, but... Maya took a breath. Colonel Foster has made it clear that my input isn't welcome. If I continue this analysis, it might be seen as insubordination. Harrington's expression hardened. Thompson, my job is to ensure the Air Force produces combat-ready pilots. If our methods are flawed, I need to know. Continue your analysis. You report directly to me now. The change was immediate and dramatic. Within days, Maya found herself with expanded access to training records, simulation systems, and classified performance data. Colonel Foster was furious but couldn't openly oppose a direct order from a 4-star general. Lieutenant Reed's reaction was predictably dismissive. Look who's got friends in high places now, he sneered when he saw Maya at a briefing. Still doesn't make you pilot material, ground control. But Maya was no longer just analyzing data. She was evaluating every aspect of the training program, identifying weaknesses that could prove fatal in actual flight conditions. Her findings painted a disturbing picture. The program was graduating pilots who excelled in following automated guidance but might fail catastrophically when that guidance was flawed. The breakthrough came when she discovered something in the historical records that changed everything. Buried in the archives was data from previous classes, including performance records from graduates who'd gone on to actual combat and emergency situations. The numbers were shocking. Several top performers from Riverside had experienced serious incidents when facing situations where automation provided incomplete or incorrect guidance. 2 had crashed when weather conditions created sensor anomalies that confused the neural networks. Maya compiled this data into a comprehensive report that she titled Human Judgment versus Automation, a Flight Safety Analysis. It was damning, detailed, and impossible to ignore. But as she prepared to submit her findings, she received an unexpected visitor. A stern-faced colonel from base security knocked on the analysis lab door. "Thompson, I need you to come with me immediately. General Harrington wants to see you right away." As Maya walked across the base, she noticed something unusual. There were more vehicles than normal in the parking area, and she could see additional security personnel at key positions. Something big was about to happen at Riverside, and Maya's timing couldn't have been worse or better, depending on how everything played out. The next few days would test everything she'd learned about human judgment, mechanical understanding, and the difference between following protocols and knowing when to break them. General Patricia Harrington arrived at Riverside Air Base on a Tuesday morning with an entourage that included Pentagon officials, congressional staffers, and a media crew documenting the Air Force's next-generation fighter pilot training program. The visit was meant to showcase the neural adaptive flight control systems and the new automated training protocols that were revolutionizing military aviation. Maya watched from the analysis lab window as the convoy rolled through the main gate. She'd spent the past week finalizing her flight safety report, but General Harrington had been mysteriously unavailable for meetings. Now she understood why. The base had been preparing for this high-profile inspection. All personnel not directly involved in the demonstration are to remain at their duty stations. Came the announcement over the base PA system. Maya was definitely not involved in the demonstration. The morning's events unfolded like a carefully choreographed performance. General Harrington observed simulator exercises where Lieutenant Reed and the other top candidates put on an impressive display of rapid response to simulated emergencies. Their performance metrics were exceptional, their confidence obvious. Remarkable improvement in training efficiency. Maya heard the general comment as the group passed near the analysis lab. "We're producing combat-ready pilots in half the traditional time." What the general didn't see were the details Maya had documented, the carefully selected scenarios that played to the automation's strengths, the predetermined conditions that minimized unpredictable variables, the absence of the edge cases, where the neural networks made dangerous decisions. Around noon, Reed approached the analysis lab with his usual swagger, magnified by the morning's success. "Hey, ground control," he called out. "You see that performance? That's what real pilots look like. Maybe you learned something." Maya was analyzing his simulation data at the time, having noticed a concerning pattern in his responses to sensor anomalies. She'd already flagged the issue in her report. "Your performance review is complete," she said simply, sending the file to his tablet. Reed barely glanced at the analysis. "Better be positive. I've got more demonstrations this afternoon." That afternoon brought the live flight demonstration, an actual F-35 exercise where candidates would showcase the seamless integration between pilot and automated systems. Maya watched from the analysis center as the aircraft took off, her eyes fixed on the real-time telemetry streaming to her monitors. Through her data feeds, Maya observed something the officials couldn't see from their viewing platform. Under the added pressure of the live demonstration, subtle flaws in the neural networks were beginning to emerge. The weather conditions, slightly different from the simulator parameters, were causing minor but concerning variations in the automated guidance systems. Reed in particular was showing signs of over-reliance. His manual inputs were minimal, letting the computer handle nearly everything. Then something went wrong. One of the atmospheric sensors malfunctioned, sending conflicting data to the flight computer. The neural network, faced with contradictory inputs, began making increasingly erratic recommendations. Maya could see it in the telemetry. The aircraft's adjusted flight path was becoming dangerously unstable. From her station in the analysis center, Maya spotted something that made her blood run cold. The neural network was misinterpreting the sensor data and recommending a flight path that would take the aircraft dangerously close to the observation platform where General Harrington and the entire delegation stood watching. Maya grabbed her radio and tried to contact flight control. Static. The demonstration included simulated communications disruption to showcase the aircraft's autonomous capabilities. She tried the emergency frequency. Nothing. Through her monitors, she watched Reed follow the automated guidance without question, his aircraft banking into a turn that would bring it too close to the viewing area. The computer was calculating a demonstration flyby, but with the faulty sensor data, it was miscalculating the safe distance. At this proximity, with the jet wash from an F-35, there was a significant risk to the observers on the platform. Maya had perhaps 20 seconds to act. She'd spent months being dismissed, mocked, and relegated to support duties. Everyone had told her she wasn't qualified, wasn't current, wasn't pilot material. But in this moment, all of that noise faded away. Maya accessed the emergency override terminal, a system she wasn't authorized to use, but one she had studied extensively. During her analysis work, with quick, precise keystrokes, she activated the remote instructor protocol, a backup system designed to allow instructors to take partial control in training situations. She had one chance to prevent a potentially catastrophic flyby, and it required exactly the kind of judgment that automation-focused training couldn't prepare someone for. Kazuka, the ability to recognize when the system itself had become the danger. The clock on her terminal showed just 14 seconds until the aircraft would pass the viewing platform. Maya's hands moved across the controls with practiced precision, the muscle memory from thousands of flight hours guiding her actions. The override activated. A warning flashed on Reed's cockpit display, but Maya knew he would likely ignore it, having been trained to trust the automation implicitly. Instead, she used the instructor protocol to introduce a subtle correction to the flight path, not enough to completely take control from Reed, but enough to nudge the aircraft to a safer distance. On her screen, she could see the F-35's trajectory adjusting slightly, adding crucial meters between the jet and the observers. Reed, following the neural guidance with perfect compliance, didn't even notice the intervention. The aircraft thundered past the viewing platform at a safe distance, the demonstration continuing without visible incident. No one on the platform realized how close they'd come to danger. Maya released her breath slowly, hands trembling slightly as she logged out of the override system. She had just violated at least 3 major protocols and potentially ended her military career, but the alternative had been unacceptable. As she was documenting the incident, the lab door burst open. Colonel Foster stormed in, his face flushed with anger. "Thompson, my office now." Following Foster down the corridor, Maya could feel the stares of everyone they passed. Something had been discovered, probably her unauthorized use of the instructor override. She steeled herself for the inevitable discharge paperwork. In Foster's office, the atmosphere was tense. Captain Chun was already there, along with a stern-looking officer from Flight Safety whom Maya didn't recognize. "Explain yourself," Foster demanded, pointing to a data log on his screen. Maya took a deep breath. "Sir, the atmospheric sensor on Lieutenant Reed's aircraft was providing faulty data to the neural network. The automated guidance was calculating an unsafe flight path that would have brought the aircraft too close to the observation platform. I used the instructor override to implement a minor course correction." "Without authorization," Foster added. "Yes, sir. There wasn't time for proper authorization. The safety of everyone on that platform was my primary concern." The flight safety officer leaned forward. "How did you even know the sensor was malfunctioning?" "Those readings weren't visible to the main flight control. I've been analyzing the integration patterns between environmental sensors and the neural networks for weeks, sir. I recognized the signature of conflicting data inputs immediately." Captain Chun spoke up. "Colonel, I've reviewed the telemetry. Thompson is right. The aircraft would have passed within unsafe proximity to the platform if not for her intervention." Foster's expression was conflicted. Maya could see him struggling between anger at her violation of protocol and recognition that she might have prevented a serious incident. Before he could respond, his office door opened without a knock. General Harrington stepped in, her presence immediately commanding the room. "Colonel," she said, her voice crisp, "I need to understand exactly what happened today." Foster stood. "At attention. General, we were just discussing an unauthorized system access by Specialist Thompson during the demonstration. She potentially saved lives," Harrington finished. "I've already reviewed the flight data. The neural network was directing that aircraft toward an unsafe proximity to the observation platform." She turned to Maya. "Thompson, explain how. You identified this malfunction when none of our flight controllers did." For the next 15 minutes, Maya walked them through her analysis, how she'd recognized the pattern of sensor degradation, identified the neural network's misinterpretation, and calculated the potential risk. When she finished, General, Harrington was silent for a long moment. "Colonel Foster, Captain Chun, I'd like to speak with Specialist Thompson alone." After they left, Harrington studied Maya with an intensity that was almost unnerving. "Thompson, your file says you've been denied flight status 3 times. Why?" Maya hesitated, then decided on complete honesty. The official reasons varied. "Ma'am, age considerations, training slot limitations, qualification technicalities. Unofficially, I believe it's because I've consistently questioned the Air Force's increasing reliance on automated systems at the expense of fundamental pilot skills. And today? Today those concerns were validated, ma'am. Lieutenant Reed is an excellent candidate by the program's metrics. He follows automated guidance perfectly. But when that guidance became flawed, he had no mechanism to recognize the danger or override his training. Harrington nodded slowly. You realize you violated multiple protocols by accessing that override system? Yes, ma'am. And you did it anyway? Yes, ma'am. Some protocols matter less than people's lives. A small smile touched the general's lips. Well said. She tapped her tablet thoughtfully. I'm implementing an immediate review of the Tactical Aviation Program, with particular emphasis on the balance between automated systems and pilot judgment. I want your full analysis report on my desk tomorrow morning. Maya blinked in surprise. Yes, ma'am. Additionally, I'm ordering a comprehensive re-evaluation of your flight status application. If your flying skills match your analytical abilities, the Air Force may have made a significant error in judgment. Maya's heart raced, but she maintained her composure. Thank you, ma'am. Don't thank me yet, Thompson. This will be a real evaluation, not a courtesy. You'll face significant resistance from those who believe in the current system. The question is, are you prepared for that fight? Maya thought of all the years she'd spent being dismissed, all the time she'd been told to trust the computer rather than her own judgment, all the pilots who'd walked away from crashes because they couldn't recognize when the automation was wrong. Yes, ma'am, I've been preparing for it my entire career. Harrington nodded. Good. Report to the flight line at 0600 tomorrow. You'll demonstrate your capabilities in an actual aircraft, not a simulator. After the general left, Maya sat alone in Foster's office, trying to process what had just happened. After years of rejection, she was finally getting the chance she'd fought for, but only because she'd been willing to risk everything to prevent a disaster that only she had seen coming. That evening, as Maya prepared her flight gear, Lieutenant Reed appeared at her door. His usual swagger was noticeably absent. Thompson, he said, his voice uncharacteristically subdued. Flight control showed me the telemetry data from today. That override you implemented, I didn't even notice it. Maya continued checking her equipment. That's the point, Lieutenant. You were trained to follow the neural guidance without question. The system is designed to be seamless. But it was wrong, Reed said, the realization clearly troubling him. If you hadn't intervened, the demonstration would have had a very different outcome, Maya finished simply. Reed shifted uncomfortably. I always thought you washed out because you couldn't adapt to modern systems. I never washed out. Reed, I was rejected because I questioned whether those systems were creating better pilots or just better system operators. He was quiet for a moment. They're saying you're flying tomorrow. For real, not sim time. That's right. Some of the guys, they're not happy about it. Foster's furious. They're saying the general is making an exception. That undermines the entire program. Maya looked at him directly for the first time. It's not an exception, Reed. It's a correction. There's a difference. After Reed left, Maya turned her attention to her flight plan for the morning. For the first time in years, she would be in the cockpit of a military aircraft, not as a technical advisor or systems analyst, but as a pilot being evaluated on her merits. The resistance she would face tomorrow would be substantial. Colonel Foster and most of the instructor cadre viewed her as a threat to the program they'd built. The other candidates saw her as an outsider who had circumvented the system they'd struggled through. But none of that mattered now. What mattered was that she had been right when it counted, when lives were at stake, when the vaunted automation had failed, when human judgment had made the critical difference. Maya picked up her old logbook, the one filled with thousands of civilian flight hours and detailed notes on aircraft systems that most military pilots barely understood. On the inside cover, she had written a quote from her flight instructor years ago. Computers calculate. Pilots fly. Tomorrow she would prove that both skills mattered, that the best pilots weren't those who blindly followed automated guidance, but those who understood when to trust it and when to rely on their own judgment. As dawn broke over Riverside Air Base, Maya walked toward the flight line with steady steps. She could see the F-35 waiting on the tarmac, its sleek lines gleaming in the early morning light. This wasn't a simulator or a demonstration. This was a real aircraft with real consequences for failure. Colonel Foster stood beside the plane, his expression making it clear he considered this evaluation a waste of time. Captain Chun was there too, along with a flight surgeon and several technical specialists. And standing apart from the others, watching with keen interest, was General Harrington. "Thompson," Foster said as she approached, "this evaluation will follow standard protocols. You'll demonstrate basic flight maneuvers followed by emergency response scenarios. The neural guidance systems will be fully operational." "With respect, sir," Maya said, "I'd like to request that portions of the evaluation be conducted with reduced automation, particularly the emergency scenarios." Foster's jaw tightened. "That's not how we train pilots at Riverside." "Which is precisely the issue we're evaluating, Colonel," General Harrington interjected. "Proceed with Thompson's request. I want to see her capabilities both with and without the neural assistance." As Maya climbed into the cockpit, she heard Foster mutter to one of the instructors, "This is a mockery of everything we've built." Maybe it was, Maya thought. Or maybe it was the beginning of something better, a program that valued both technological advancement and the irreplaceable human element that no neural network could fully replicate. The canopy closed with a solid thunk, sealing her into the cockpit. Maya ran through her pre-flight checks methodically, her hands moving across the controls with practiced precision. This wasn't her first time in an F-35 cockpit. She'd logged hundreds of hours in the simulators during her analysis work, but it was her first time preparing to actually fly one. "Thompson, this is Control," Foster's voice came through. Her head set. "Proceed with engine start and prepare for taxi." Maya acknowledged and began the startup sequence. The powerful engine came to life with a whine that built to a confident roar. The neural interfaces activated, filling her heads-up display with information, suggested control inputs, system status, environmental data. "Control, Thompson. Request permission for runway 29er. Permission granted. Follow automated. Taxi guidance." Maya smiled slightly. Foster was already testing her compliance with the neural systems. She activated the taxi guidance but maintained manual control of the throttle and brakes, working with the automation rather than surrendering to it completely. As she reached the runway, Maya took a deep breath. This was the moment she'd fought for, the chance to prove that her approach to aviation wasn't outdated but essential. "Thompson, you are cleared for takeoff. Proceed with standard climb profile." The F-35 accelerated down the runway, gathering speed with astonishing rapidity. Maya felt the familiar surge of acceleration pressing her back into the seat. At rotation speed, she pulled back smoothly on the stick, feeling the precise moment when the aircraft broke free of the earth and leapt into the sky. For the next 30 minutes, Maya demonstrated standard flight maneuvers, turns, climbs, descents, all performed with textbook precision. She used the neural guidance as a reference, but flew primarily by feel and visual cues, demonstrating a natural connection with the aircraft that went beyond following computer prompts. "Thompson, prepare for emergency scenario 1, Foster's voice had a hint of challenge in it. "Sensor failure imminent." Maya acknowledged, then watched as multiple sensor systems began reporting conflicting data. The neural network struggled to make sense of the contradictory inputs, its suggested flight path becoming increasingly erratic. This was exactly the kind of scenario Maya had documented in her report, the situation where automation-dependent pilots often made critical mistakes. Instead of following the fluctuating guidance, Maya reduced her reliance on the affected sensors and flew based on her fundamental understanding of aerodynamics and aircraft behavior. She maintained a stable flight path despite the system's confusion. Scenario complete. Foster announced, his tone neutral. Proceed to Scenario 2. The scenarios grew increasingly complex, from simple equipment malfunctions to catastrophic systems failures that would challenge even the most experienced pilots. In each case, Maya demonstrated the perfect balance between utilizing the advanced systems when they were reliable and falling back on fundamental piloting skills when they weren't. After the final scenario, there was a long silence from control. Thompson, General Harrington's voice came through instead of Foster's. Demonstrate a manual approach and landing. No neural assistance. This was the ultimate test, landing the sophisticated fighter without the guidance systems that most pilots had come to depend on completely. Maya acknowledged and turned the aircraft toward the runway. She disabled the neural interfaces, leaving only the essential flight instruments active. The heads-up display simplified dramatically, showing only altitude, airspeed, and attitude indicators. The approach was textbook, a smooth, controlled descent toward the runway threshold. Maya made small, precise adjustments based on visual cues and her feel for the aircraft. The F-35 responded beautifully to her touch, as if recognizing a pilot who truly understood flight beyond algorithms and automation. The landing was perfect, a gentle touchdown precisely on the center line, followed by controlled deceleration. As Maya taxied back to the apron, she could see a small crowd had gathered. The morning's evaluation had drawn attention across the base. Among the onlookers were several of the pilot candidates, including Lieutenant Reed, watching with expressions ranging from curiosity to disbelief. After completing shutdown procedures, Maya climbed down from the cockpit. General Harrington approached, her expression unreadable. "Walk with me, Thompson." They moved away from the crowd, toward the quiet edge of the flight line. "That was an impressive demonstration," Harrington said finally, "particularly the manual landing. Most of our candidates rely heavily on the automated landing systems." "Thank you, ma'am." Colonel Foster is not happy. He believes making exceptions to the program undermines its integrity. Maya chose her words carefully. "With respect, ma'am, I don't see this as an exception. I see it as a necessary evolution. The neural systems are remarkable tools, but they're still just tools. The pilot must remain the final authority." Harrington nodded slowly. "I've reviewed your full report on the program. Your concerns about over-reliance on automation are well-founded and supported by data. The incident yesterday simply provided a real-world demonstration of the risks you identified." She turned to face Maya directly. "I'm implementing immediate changes to the Tactical Aviation Program. First, all current candidates will undergo additional evaluation focusing on manual flight proficiency. Second, the training curriculum will be redesigned to emphasize what you've called adaptive integration, knowing when to utilize automation and when to rely on fundamental piloting skills." Maya listened, hardly daring to believe what she was hearing. "And third," Harrington continued, "effective immediately, you are granted full flight status and assigned as a special advisor to the training program. Your first responsibility will be helping to develop the new integrated curriculum." Maya felt her composure waver for the first time. "Ma'am, thank you." "Don't thank me, Thompson. You earned this. Not just today, but through years of standing by your principles despite the cost." Harrington's expression softened slightly. The easy path would have been to simply accept the prevailing wisdom about automation. The harder path was to question it, especially when doing so made you an outsider. As they walked back toward the main building, Maya saw Lieutenant Reed waiting nearby. His usual swagger was gone, replaced by something that looked almost like respect. "That landing," he said as they approached, "how did you make it look so smooth without the neural guidance?" Maya looked at him, seeing perhaps the first crack in his reliance on automated systems. "I felt the aircraft," she said simply, "something no neural network can teach you." The transformation of Riverside Air Base's Tactical Aviation Program didn't happen overnight. In the weeks following Maya's flight demonstration, resistance to change manifested in 1,000 small ways. Colonel Foster implemented General Harrington's directives with technical compliance, but obvious reluctance. Veteran instructors questioned the need to regress to outdated methodologies. Several candidates even requested transfers rather than adapt to the new training philosophy. Maya faced the resistance with the same quiet determination that had carried her through years of rejection. Each morning, she arrived at the flight line before dawn to prepare for the day's training flights. Each evening, she stayed late, analyzing performance data and refining the new curriculum that balanced technological advancement with fundamental piloting skills. "They're calling it the Thompson Doctrine," Captain Chun told her one evening as they reviewed candidate performance metrics. "Behind your back, of course." Maya looked up from her tablet. "The what?" "The Thompson Doctrine. Your approach to integration rather than automation. Some say it as an insult, but it's catching on. Even some of the skeptics are starting to see the value." Lieutenant Reed had become an unexpected ally. After his near miss during the demonstration flight, he'd approached Maya with uncharacteristic humility. "I want to understand what I missed," he'd said, sliding his performance data across her desk. "Show me what you saw that I didn't." That simple request had evolved into regular training sessions. Reed's natural talent, combined with a newly developed appreciation for manual flight skills, made him an ideal bridge between the old philosophy and the new. Other candidates began to follow his example, slowly at first, then in growing numbers. 6 weeks into the program's overhaul, General Harrington returned to Riverside for a progress assessment. Maya stood at attention as the general reviewed the latest performance data. "Impressive improvements, Thompson," Harrington said, studying the metrics. "Candidates are showing significantly better response patterns to system anomalies." "Thank you, ma'am. We're seeing particularly strong results in the edge case scenarios." Harrington nodded thoughtfully. Colonel Foster seems less convinced. He submitted 3 formal protests regarding the curriculum changes. Maya had expected as much. Foster remained the most prominent opponent of what he called the regression to analog thinking. "Change is difficult, ma'am, especially for those who built the original system." "Indeed." Harrington set down the tablet. "Which brings me to the reason for my visit. The Pentagon is hosting an aviation technology summit next month. The future of military flight training will be a central topic. I want you there." Maya blinked in surprise. "Ma'am, your perspective needs a wider audience, Thompson. The issues you've identified at Riverside aren't isolated. The entire Air Force is wrestling with the proper balance between human judgment and artificial intelligence. The summit would put Maya in direct confrontation with the highest levels of military aviation leadership, the very people who had championed the automation-first approach she was challenging." "Of course, ma'am. I'd be honored." As Harrington turned to leave, she paused. "Be prepared for significant opposition, Thompson. There are substantial budgets and careers invested in the current philosophy. Not everyone will appreciate having their assumptions challenged by someone they've previously rejected." Maya nodded. "I understand, ma'am." After Harrington departed, Maya found herself alone on the flight line, watching the sunset paint the aircraft in hues of gold and crimson. The general's warning echoed in her mind. The battle for Riverside had been difficult enough. Taking her challenge to the Pentagon would be another level entirely. But as she watched a new candidate practicing manual landing approaches, something that would have been unthinkable just months ago, she felt a quiet certainty. She was right about this. And being right mattered more than being accepted. The Pentagon's Aviation Technology Summit was a gathering of military minds, defense contractors, and technology innovators, all focused on defining the future of aerial warfare. Maya arrived to find herself the subject of considerable curiosity. Word of the Thompson doctrine had spread beyond Riverside, generating both interest and skepticism. "So you're the maintenance officer who thinks computers make pilots worse," said Air Force Colonel James Barrett, approaching Maya during the MYC pre-summit reception. His tone made it clear which side of the debate he favored. "That's not quite my position, sir," Maya replied evenly. "I believe integration is superior to dependency." Barrett raised an eyebrow. Strong words from someone who only recently received flight status. "Some of us have been developing these systems for decades. With respect, sir, development time doesn't guarantee optimal outcomes. The data from Riverside speaks for itself." Barrett's retort was interrupted by the arrival of General Harrington, who smoothly redirected the conversation. Later, she pulled Maya aside. "You'll need to choose your battles carefully tomorrow, Thompson. Barrett chairs the Autonomous Systems Development Committee. He views your approach as a direct challenge to his life's work." Maya nodded. "I understand. MAAM, but I won't dilute the findings to make them more palatable." Harrington studied her for a moment. "Good. Conviction matters here, especially when you're challenging the status quo. Just remember that how you present your case is as important as what you present." The summit's main session began the following morning in the Pentagon's largest conference room. Military brass from all branches filled the first rows, followed by rows of defense contractors, systems engineers, and training specialists. Maya sat beside General Harrington, acutely aware of the evaluating glances directed her way. The opening presentations followed predictable patterns: celebrations of technological advancement, reports of increased efficiency through automation, projections of further reductions in pilot training time through enhanced neural guidance systems. Each speaker reinforced the prevailing wisdom that human pilots were increasingly becoming system managers rather than aircraft controllers. Then came Maya's turn. As she approached the podium, she felt a momentary flutter of doubt. The room was filled with generals, aerospace executives, and veteran pilots, people with decades more experience and influence than she possessed. Who was she to challenge their collective wisdom? She took a deep breath, remembering the telemetry data from Reed's near disaster, remembering all the pilots who had crashed when their automated systems failed them, remembering why this mattered. "Good morning," she began. "My name is Captain Maya Thompson, and I'm here to present findings from Riverside Air Base's Tactical Aviation Program regarding the optimal integration of neural guidance systems and fundamental pilot skills." For the next 30 minutes, Maya laid out her case methodically, supported by rigorous data analysis and specific examples. She showed how over-reliance on automation created dangerous blind spots in pilot capability. She demonstrated the performance improvements achieved when pilots maintained proficiency in manual flight control. Most powerfully, she presented a statistical analysis of incidents and near misses directly attributable to automation dependency. In conclusion, Maya said, "The evidence indicates that our current approach prioritizes convenience over capability. We are training pilots to follow automated guidance with perfect compliance, but we're not developing their ability to recognize when that guidance is flawed. The result is increased vulnerability precisely when resilience matters most, during system anomalies and edge case scenarios." The silence that followed her presentation was broken by Colonel Barrett. "Captain Thompson," he said, his voice carrying the weight of authority, "your analysis seems to suggest that we should reverse years of advancement in autonomous systems. Is that your recommendation?" Maya met his gaze steadily. "No, sir. My recommendation is evolution, not reversal. The neural systems represent extraordinary technological achievement, but technology should enhance human capability, not replace it. When we train pilots to depend entirely on automation, we're not creating better pilots, we're creating better passengers." A murmur ran through the room. The metaphor was pointed, perhaps too pointed for such an audience. Barrett's expression hardened. That's an insulting characterization of our training philosophy, Captain. The automated systems have dramatically reduced human error incidents. In standard scenarios, yes, sir. But they've introduced new categories of error in non-standard scenarios. The data is clear on this point. Data can be interpreted many ways, Captain, Barrett countered. Your limited experience at one training facility hardly qualifies you to recommend overhauling the entire Air Force approach. Before Maya could respond, another voice joined the discussion. Air Force Major General David Reyes, commander of the Air Combat Command, had been listening silently until now. I've reviewed Captain Thompson's full report, Reyes said, his deep voice commanding attention. Her analysis aligns with concerns my command has been tracking for the past 18 months. We've observed a troubling pattern of incidents during complex operations when automated systems encounter scenarios outside their training parameters. The discussion that followed was intense, with passionate arguments from both sides. Maya held her ground, responding to challenges with data rather than defensiveness, clarifying misunderstandings without conceding essential points. By the session's end, she had neither convinced everyone nor been dismissed entirely, a victory of sorts in such a forum. As the summit continued over the next 2 days, Maya found unexpected support emerging from various quarters. A group of frontline squadron commanders endorsed her findings based on their operational experiences. Several systems engineers admitted that the neural networks had limitations that training protocols weren't adequately addressing. Even some defense contractors acknowledged that a more balanced approach might actually create opportunities for new types of integration technologies. On the final day, General Harrington invited Maya to join a closed-door session with the Air Force Chief of Staff and key decision-makers from the training command. The discussion was frank, detailed, and surprisingly receptive to Maya's perspective. Captain Thompson, the Chief of Staff said as the meeting concluded, your analysis has challenged some deeply held assumptions. That's uncomfortable but necessary. I'm authorizing a comprehensive review of our pilot training methodology with a specific focus on the balance you've identified. It wasn't total victory, but it was far more than Maya had dared to hope for. As she left the Pentagon that evening, General Harrington fell into step beside her. You've started something significant, Thompson, the general said. The debate won't be resolved quickly, but it's happening at the highest levels now. Thank you for the opportunity, ma'am. Harrington smiled slightly. You earned it. Not many people would have stood their ground in that room. Fewer still would have done it effectively. Maya thought about the long journey that had brought her to this point. The rejections, the relegation to support roles, the persistent dismissal of her concerns. Something had sustained her through all of that, something more than just stubborn determination. Permission to speak freely, ma'am. Always, Thompson. I think we sometimes forget why we fly in the first place. The technology is incredible, but it's not why we become pilots. We fly because there's something irreplaceable about the human connection to flight, the intuition, the feel, the judgment that comes from truly understanding an aircraft rather than just operating it. Harrington considered this. That's not the kind of argument that sways Pentagon committees, Thompson. No, ma'am. But it's why this matters beyond safety statistics and performance metrics. We're not just trying to prevent incidents. We're preserving what makes military aviation extraordinary, the pilots themselves. 3 months after the Pentagon summit, Maya stood on Riverside's main runway watching a training exercise that would have been unrecognizable before her intervention. Candidates moved seamlessly between automated and manual flight modes, demonstrating the integrated approach that had become known officially as the Adaptive Pilot Protocol, though many still called it the Thompson Doctrine unofficially. Lieutenant Reed, now an instructor himself, approached as the exercise concluded. The new class is getting it, he said, watching the aircraft taxi back to the apron. They don't see it as automation versus manual control anymore. It's just flying, using every tool appropriately. Maya nodded. That's exactly the point. How's Colonel Foster adapting? Reed grinned. Still grumbles about unnecessary complexity in the training protocols, but even he can't argue with the results. The incident rate during advanced training is down 68%. The success at Riverside had led to the program being expanded to 3 additional training bases, with Maya rotating between locations to oversee implementation. Her promotion to major had come through last month, a formal recognition of her contributions that still seemed slightly surreal. Major Thompson, a young airman called, jogging across the tarmac. Priority message from Pentagon Command. Maya took the tablet, scanning the message quickly. Her pulse quickened as she read the details. A high-priority transport flight carrying diplomatic personnel was reporting multiple system failures while crossing the Pacific. The neural guidance systems had shut down completely, forcing the crew to fly manually, something they were minimally prepared for under the old training protocols. I need to get to command immediately, she told Reed, already moving toward the operations building. In the command center, Maya found Colonel Foster already coordinating with Pacific Air Command. Thompson, he acknowledged with a nod. You've seen the situation brief? Yes, sir. Current status? Foster's expression was grim, not good. The crew is struggling with manual control. The aircraft is stable for now, but they're reporting significant difficulties maintaining optimal flight parameters without the neural guidance. Maya studied the telemetry data streaming across the main screen. The transport, a C-40 Clipper, modified with the latest neural flight systems, was indeed flying, but its path showed the hallmarks of pilots unprepared for sustained manual operation. Who's on board? She asked. Ambassador Chun and her diplomatic team, returning from Beijing. 17 souls total. Maya's mind raced. This was exactly the scenario she had warned about. Highly trained pilots rendered partially ineffective. When forced to fly without the automation they'd come to depend on. We need to establish direct communication with the cockpit, she said. I can talk them through stabilization procedures. Foster hesitated. That's not standard protocol for this situation. With respect, sir, standard protocols assume pilots trained under standard conditions. These pilots need immediate guidance from someone who understands both the aircraft systems and manual flight techniques. Their eyes met, years of disagreement suspended in the urgency of the moment. Finally, Foster nodded. Make it happen, he ordered the communications officer. Minutes later, Maya was connected directly to the struggling transport. Pacific Transport 4937. This is Major Thompson at Riverside Command. I'm going to help you stabilize your aircraft and manage your approach to Guam. The relief in the pilot's voice was palpable. Roger that, Riverside. We're maintaining altitude but struggling with optimal trim and heading stability. For the next 2 hours, Maya guided the crew through a series of procedures designed to help them reconnect with the fundamental feel of their aircraft. She talked them through manual trim adjustments, proper scan patterns for analog instruments, and techniques for maintaining consistent control inputs without digital assistance. Gradually, the aircraft's flight path stabilized. The erratic altitude fluctuations diminished. The heading became more consistent. You're doing great. 4937, Maya encouraged. Remember, you knew how to fly before the computers did. Trust your training, trust your instincts. As the transport approached Guam, Maya walked the crew through the manual approach procedures they had likely practiced only in simulations. Disregard the automated approach path entirely, she instructed. Focus on your visual references and analog instruments. You've got this. The landing wasn't pretty, a firm touchdown followed by more aggressive braking than necessary, but it was safe. All 17 passengers and crew walked away unharmed. Hours later, as Maya was completing her incident report, her secure line rang. It was General Harrington. "Quite a day, Thompson," the general said without preamble. "Ambassador Chun asked me to personally convey her gratitude. She said the captain told her it was your guidance that made the difference. The crew did the hard part, ma'am. I just reminded them of what they already knew, perhaps. But according to their training records, what they already knew was increasingly minimal. Under the previous protocols, manual flight proficiency was considered a secondary skill at best." There was a pause, then Harrington continued. "The Air Force Chief of Staff was on another transport in the same airspace." He heard the entire exchange. Maya's hand tightened on the phone. "Sir, he wants to see you in Washington next week. The adaptive pilot protocol is being fast-tracked for implementation across all Air Force training facilities. He wants you to oversee the transition personally." After the call ended, Maya sat quietly in her office, absorbing the implications. The change she had fought for so persistently was becoming Air Force doctrine. The principles she had defended despite ridicule and rejection were being validated at the highest levels. A soft knock interrupted her thoughts. Lieutenant Reed stood in the doorway. "Word's spreading about what you did today," he said. "The crew is calling it a miracle save." Maya shook her head. "Not a miracle. Just good piloting fundamentals applied when they mattered most." Reed studied her for a moment. "You know, when you first started challenging the automation protocols, I thought you were just bitter about washing out. I didn't understand what you were really fighting for. And now I get it. Today proved everything you've been saying. Those pilots would have crashed if they'd been trained exclusively on the neural systems. They survived because someone finally listened to you." As Reed left, Maya turned to the window overlooking the flight line. The sun was setting, casting long shadows across the tarmac where a new class of pilots was completing their day's training. Pilots being taught to master both the most advanced technology and the most fundamental skills. It had taken years of persistence, countless rejections, and one critical moment when only she recognized the danger. But looking at those pilots now, truly prepared for whatever challenges they might face, Maya knew every difficult step had been worthwhile. She picked up her old logbook, the one that had accompanied her through civilian aviation and her long journey to military acceptance. On the inside cover, beneath her original note about computers calculating and pilots flying, she added a new line: "Technology serves aviation, not the other way around." 1 year after the Pacific transport incident, Major Maya Thompson stood at the podium in the Air Force Academy's largest auditorium. Before her sat nearly 1,000 cadets, future pilots, who would fly aircraft more sophisticated than anything currently in the skies. Behind her on the massive screen was the title of her lecture, "Human Judgment in the Age of Artificial Intelligence." "Aviation has always balanced two competing needs," Maya began, her voice carrying clearly through the hall. "The need for consistency, which technology provides, and the need for adaptability, which humans provide. For a time we convinced ourselves that advanced neural systems could deliver both. We were wrong." Maya looked out at the sea of young faces. These cadets had grown up in a world where AI made most of their daily decisions. Many had never known a time when humans were the primary decision makers in complex systems. The adaptive pilot protocol wasn't created because technology failed, she continued. It was created because we failed to understand technology's proper role. We forgot that neural networks, no matter how advanced, are tools designed to serve human purposes, not replace human judgment. As she spoke, Maya reflected on the extraordinary journey of the past year. After the successful landing of the diplomatic transport, events had moved with surprising speed. The Air Force Chief of Staff had indeed fast-tracked the implementation of her training protocols. Within 6 months, Every major flight training facility had begun integrating her balanced approach. What Maya hadn't anticipated was how her story would resonate beyond military aviation. Commercial airlines had quickly recognized the same vulnerabilities in their training programs and begun implementing similar reforms. The aviation industry publications that had once dismissed her as an anachronism now featured her on their covers. The Thompson Doctrine had become a case study in leadership programs and technical schools across the country. "Your generation faces a unique challenge," Maya told the cadets. "You've never known a world without algorithmic assistance. You've grown up with AI helping you make decisions, from what music to listen to what career to pursue. That makes it harder, not easier, for you to understand when to override automated guidance." She advanced to the next slide, a detailed analysis of flight incidents categorized by cause. These statistics tell a story. When systems function within their design parameters, automation reduces incidents dramatically. But when conditions exceed those parameters, when the unexpected occurs, automation can actually increase danger by creating pilot dependency. A hand raised in the front row. "Major Thompson, if the neural systems are constantly improving, won't they eventually handle all possible scenarios better than humans?" It was a common question, reflecting the prevailing techno-optimism that still dominated much of society. "That assumption contains a fundamental misunderstanding," Maya replied. "Aviation isn't about handling all possible scenarios. It's about handling the impossible scenario, the one no programmer anticipated, the one no neural network was trained to recognize." She clicked to a new slide showing the Pacific Transport's flight path during the system's failure. When this aircraft lost its neural guidance, the pilots had been relying on automation for so long that they'd lost their fundamental connection to the aircraft. They knew the procedures, but had lost the feel, the intuitive understanding that comes from direct control. Maya stepped away from the podium, moving closer to the cadets. "The most dangerous phrase in aviation isn't mayday or system failure. It's the computers got this. Because when you surrender your judgment to automation without question, you're no longer a pilot. You're a passenger." After the lecture, a small group of cadets approached Maya as she gathered her materials. "Major Thompson," said a young woman with lieutenant bars. "I'm Elizabeth Chen." Maya looked up with sudden recognition. "Ambassador Chun's daughter?" The young woman nodded. "My mother was on that transport. She told me what you did, how you talked the pilots through when their systems failed. That's why I requested fighter training instead of drone operations." Maya smiled. "Your mother is a remarkable woman. She sent me a very kind letter after the incident." "She did more than that, ma'am," Lieutenant Chun replied. "She's been advocating for your approach in international aviation forums. The Chun-Thompson Aviation Safety Initiative is gaining significant support." This was news to Maya. She'd been so focused on military implementation that she hadn't followed the diplomatic dimensions closely. "I'm honored," she said simply. "Please convey my gratitude to your mother." As the cadets departed, General Harrington appeared in the doorway. Though technically retired now, she remained an influential advisor to the Joint Chiefs. "Impressive lecture, Thompson," she said, entering the auditorium. "You've become quite the inspirational speaker." Maya gathered her tablet. "Just sharing lessons learned, ma'am." "Lessons that have saved lives," Harrington corrected. "The preliminary data from the implementation review is remarkable. Incident rates down across all categories, but particularly in non-standard scenarios." They walked together toward the exit. "I didn't come just to compliment your speaking skills," Harrington continued. "I'm here about Operation Skyward Sentinel." Maya tensed slightly. Skyward Sentinel was the Air Force's next-generation combat aircraft program, a highly classified initiative to develop planes with unprecedented integration of AI and human capability. "The program directors have requested you specifically," Harrington explained. They want the Thompson doctrine built into the aircraft's core design philosophy, not added as an afterthought. Maya stopped walking. That's unexpected defense. Contractors usually prefer systems that minimize human intervention. Times change. Perspectives evolve. Harrington smiled slightly, especially when someone demonstrates irrefutably that the old approach was fundamentally flawed. The following week, Maya found herself in a secure facility deep within Wright-Patterson Air Force Base. The Skyward Sentinel Development Team, a mixture of military personnel, civilian scientists, and aerospace engineers, had gathered. For her initial briefing, Dr. Elaine Novak, the program's chief scientist, began the session by displaying complex neural network architectures on the main screen. "Major Thompson, we've been following your work closely," Novak said. "Your insights about human-machine integration have significant implications for our approach. We'd like you to review our current design philosophy and provide recommendations." For the next several hours, Maya immersed herself in the details of the most advanced aircraft program in history. The proposed neural systems went far beyond anything currently deployed, borderline sentient, decision-making algorithms designed to process combat variables at superhuman speed. When the presentation concluded, there was an expectant silence. The team clearly anticipated Maya's enthusiastic endorsement of their groundbreaking work. "The technical achievement is extraordinary," she began carefully. "But I have serious concerns about the fundamental architecture." Dr. Novak frowned. "Concerns?" "The neural systems exceed all current performance benchmarks." "That's precisely the issue," Maya replied. "You've designed a system that positions the pilot as a supervisor rather than an integrator. In standard scenarios, it will perform brilliantly. But when it encounters the unexpected, and in combat, the unexpected is guaranteed. You've created the same vulnerability we've been working to eliminate." She stood and moved to the whiteboard, sketching an alternative architecture. "The neural system should enhance the pilot's capabilities, not replace them. The human should remain the primary decision-maker, with the AI providing analysis and recommendations rather than autonomous control. That limits the system's response." "Speed," objected one of the engineers. "Human processing simply can't match algorithmic efficiency." "Speed isn't everything," Maya countered, echoing the lesson that had defined her career. "Judgment matters more. The question isn't whether the AI can make decisions faster than the pilot. The question is whether those faster decisions will always be right, and what happens when they're wrong." The debate that followed was intense but productive. By day's end, Maya had convinced the team to reconsider their fundamental approach. The Skyward Sentinel would pioneer a new relationship between pilot and aircraft, true integration rather than either human or machine dominance. As Maya was preparing to leave, Dr. Novak approached. "I owe you an apology, Major," she said. "I was skeptical about bringing you into the program. I thought your approach was, well, regressive." Maya smiled. "A common misconception. Integration isn't about going backward. It's about moving forward more wisely." "I realize that now," Novak admitted, "but there's something you should know. Not everyone on the program shares my conversion. There are powerful interests, both military and corporate, heavily invested in the automation-first approach. They won't abandon it easily." "I'm familiar with resistance," Maya replied. "It comes with challenging established thinking." Novak lowered her voice. "This goes beyond normal bureaucratic resistance. The automation pathway represents billions in development contracts and established career trajectories. Some see your approach as an existential threat to their futures." The warning proved prescient. Within weeks, Maya found herself fighting battles on multiple fronts. Anonymous reports questioning her technical qualifications began circulating through Pentagon channels. Her past performance evaluations were scrutinized for any hint of weakness. A whisper campaign suggested her success with the Pacific transport had been exaggerated for public relations purposes. At a critical program review, Colonel James Barrett, now a general and still Maya's most persistent critic, launched a direct challenge. Major Thompson's recommendations would add years to the development timeline and billions to the budget. He argued before the review committee, all to address theoretical vulnerabilities that our simulations suggest are vanishingly unlikely. Maya waited for her turn to respond, gathering her thoughts carefully. When she finally spoke, her voice was calm but resolute. With respect, General Barrett, I once sat in a systems analysis lab and watched a vanishingly unlikely scenario nearly result in disaster during a routine demonstration. The history of aviation is written in the blood of pilots who encountered scenarios the simulators deemed vanishingly unlikely. She displayed a series of incident reports on the main screen. These 12 crashes all occurred during optimal conditions with fully functional automation. In each case, the neural systems made logical decisions based on their programming. And in each case, those logical decisions were catastrophically wrong because the systems encountered variables outside their training parameters. Maya turned to face Barrett directly. The choice before us isn't between progress and regression. It's between integration and dependency. Between pilots who use advanced tools and passengers who hope those tools never fail. The committee ultimately sided with Maya, recommending that the Skyward Sentinel program adopt her integrated approach. It was a significant victory, but it came with a cost. The opposition to her methods had become more entrenched, more personal, and more determined. Late one evening, as Maya was leaving the secure development facility, she found Lieutenant Reed waiting beside her car. Now a major himself, Reed had become one of the most effective instructors in the adaptive pilot program. Tough crowd in there today, he said, falling into step beside her. Maya sighed. Barrett doesn't give up easily. No, but neither do you. Reed hesitated. Listen, there's something you should know. Word's going around that they're planning to reassign you. Something administrative. Far from Skyward Sentinel and flight training. Maya stopped walking. Where did you hear this? I have friends in personnel. Nothing's official yet, but the paperwork is being prepared. They can't openly oppose your methods anymore, not with the success rates you've demonstrated. So they're trying a different approach. The news shouldn't have surprised her. Bureaucracies had many ways to neutralize those who challenged established thinking. Still, Maya felt a momentary weight of disappointment. She'd hoped that the results would speak for themselves, that saving lives would matter more than saving face. Thanks for the warning, she said finally. I'll start preparing. Reed looked confused. Preparing for what? To fight it? Maya smiled slightly. No, to make sure the principles survive even if I'm not there to defend them. Over the next several weeks, Maya worked with an intensity that surprised even those who knew her well. She documented every aspect of the integrated approach in exhaustive detail. She created training materials that anticipated every possible objection. She built a comprehensive data analysis system that would continue monitoring performance metrics long after she was gone. Most importantly, she identified and mentored promising officers who shared her vision, pilots like Reed, who understood intuitively the vital balance between technological advancement and human judgment. The reassignment order came on a Tuesday morning. Maya was to report to Air Force Logistics Command, a position with impressive title, but little actual influence over flight operations or training philosophies. As she packed her office, General Harrington arrived unannounced. I heard, the general said without preamble. Barrett and his allies think they've won. Maya continued organizing her materials. They've won a skirmish, not the war. The Thompson doctrine is bigger than me now. It's in the training manuals, the flight protocols, the performance metrics. Most importantly, it's in the minds of a generation of pilots who've seen its value firsthand. Harrington studied her curiously. You don't seem particularly upset. Disappointed, yes. Upset, no. Maya closed her briefcase. I've accomplished what I set out to do. The principles are established. Others will carry them forward now. Others, Harrington repeated thoughtfully. Like Lieutenant Chun, Ambassador Chun's daughter? Maya looked up in surprise. Elizabeth, she's a promising officer, but very junior. She won't be junior forever. And she has her mother's determination. Harrington smiled slightly. The ambassador has been quite vocal about your contributions to aviation safety. In fact, she specifically requested your presence at next month's International Aviation Safety Summit in Geneva. I doubt my new position will allow for international travel, Maya pointed out. Your new position, Harrington said, her smile widening, is not at Logistics Command. She handed Maya a folder containing official orders. By direct authorization of the Joint Chiefs, you are being promoted to Lieutenant Colonel and assigned as Special Advisor for Human-Machine Integration to the Air Force Chief of Staff, effective immediately. Maya stared at the orders in disbelief. This overrides Barrett's reassignment? Completely. It seems the Chief of Staff was most impressed by your willingness to prioritize principles over personal advancement. He also appreciates that you've built systems to perpetuate those principles, rather than making yourself indispensable. Harrington's expression became serious. The battle isn't over, Thompson. Barrett and his allies will continue fighting for their vision. But now you'll be fighting on equal ground, with the full backing of the Chief of Staff. 2 months later, Lieutenant Colonel Maya Thompson stood at the window of her Pentagon office, watching aircraft from nearby Andrews Air Force Base trace patterns across the sky. Each of those aircraft represented the Thompson Doctrine in action, pilots fully integrated with their advanced systems rather than subordinated to them. A knock at her door interrupted her thoughts. Ambassador Chun entered, accompanied by her daughter, Lieutenant Elizabeth Chun. Colonel Thompson, the ambassador greeted her warmly. I hope we're not interrupting. Not at all, Ambassador. It's an honor to meet you in person finally. The ambassador smiled. The honor is mine. Your intervention saved not only my life, but the lives of every person on that transport. More importantly, your persistence has changed aviation for the better. She gestured to her daughter. Elizabeth tells me you've become something of a legend at the Academy. The pilot who stood her ground against the machines. Maya laughed. Hardly that dramatic. I simply advocated for balance when others were pushing for extremes. Sometimes balance is the most radical position of all, the ambassador observed. Particularly in a world increasingly dominated by artificial intelligence. Lieutenant Chun spoke up. Colonel, I wanted to tell you personally, I've been selected for the Skyward Sentinel test pilot program. Congratulations, Lieutenant. That's extraordinary. It wouldn't have been possible without you, Chun replied earnestly. Not just because you saved my mother, but because you created a path for pilots who believe in true integration rather than automation. After they departed, Maya returned to the window, reflecting on the remarkable journey that had brought her here. From rejected candidate to Pentagon advisor. From maintenance officer to doctrine creator. From outsider to influencer. The path had never been easy. At every stage she'd faced those who dismissed her concerns, mocked her caution, or actively worked to undermine her progress. She'd endured years of rejection, relegation to support roles, and persistent attempts to silence her perspective. What had sustained her through all of that wasn't just stubborn determination, though that had certainly played a part. It was the unshakable conviction that what she was fighting for mattered, that the balance between human judgment and artificial intelligence was worth defending, even at personal cost. On her desk sat the worn logbook that had accompanied her throughout her journey. Its pages now contain not only flight data and system notes, but the evolution of an idea that had transformed military aviation. On the final page, she had recently added a new entry. The machines we create reflect our values. When we surrender human judgment to algorithmic efficiency, we don't just change how decisions are made, we change what we value in decision-making. Speed over wisdom, consistency over creativity, compliance over courage. The Thompson doctrine isn't about flying planes. It's about remaining human in an increasingly automated world. Maya Thompson had never set out to create a doctrine or change military aviation. She had simply refused to accept that efficiency mattered more than effectiveness, that speed mattered more than judgment, that technology should replace humanity rather than enhance it. In standing firm on that principle, despite rejection, despite mockery, despite active opposition, she had ultimately changed not just how pilots flew, but how an entire institution thought about the relationship between humans and machines. As she watched the aircraft dancing across the sky, Maya felt a quiet satisfaction. The woman they'd dismissed as too cautious, too manual, too human had proven that sometimes the very qualities that seem like weaknesses are actually the greatest strengths of all. The pilots flying those planes would never know her story. They would simply take for granted that their training balanced technology and human skill, that their aircraft were designed to enhance their capabilities rather than replace them, that their judgment remained the final authority even in an age of artificial intelligence. And perhaps that was the greatest victory of all, not that her name was attached to a doctrine, but that her principles had become so fundamental they seemed obvious. Future generations of pilots would never know there was a time when machines nearly replaced pilot judgment entirely. They would simply fly as she had always believed they should, as humans enhanced by technology, not replaced by it. Lieutenant Colonel Maya Thompson turned from the window and returned to her desk. There was still work to be done, battles still to fight. But the hardest part, standing alone against the prevailing wisdom, was behind her. Sometimes the person everyone overlooks is exactly the person everyone needs. Sometimes the one who moves too cautiously is the only one moving in the right direction. And sometimes, just sometimes, being different isn't a weakness. It's the very strength the world has been waiting for. If you enjoyed this story, don't forget to hit the subscribe button and become part of our Everyday Inspiration Stories community. Where are you watching from? Drop a comment below. We love hearing from our amazing viewers around the world. Up next, you've got 2 more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out. And don't forget to subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you don't miss any upload from us.